All right, everybody. So welcome to this session, Partnership and Collaboration with People with Lived Experience of Homelessness. Thanks for being with us here today. I hope your day is going great and that you enjoyed the last session. For those of you who don't know me, although I was showcased in the last session, my name is Romina, and I'm the Youth Improvement Advisor here at Community Solutions. It's really my honor and my pleasure to start this session with you. And I personally am really thrilled that this issue has been getting a lot of spotlight lately in our sector as we work to embrace equity. Having personally been on multiple sides of the sector, having experienced homelessness and then working in service delivery and system design, and now doing coaching work for communities, I can really honestly say that genuine partnership and co-design with people with lived experience is really not just a nice to have box check, but it's necessary and integral to doing the work of creating equitable systems with equitable outcomes. In this session, we're going to be discussing what it means to truly co-design with people with lived experience, best practices in engaging people with lived experience, and we'll also be troubleshooting barriers to engagement. And I do want to make it clear that as we present this information to you, we at Community Solutions are also learning how to do this work right alongside with you. We don't have all of the answers to date, and so to that end, we have co-designed this session with the PLE Institute. So Amber, if you can just hit the next slide. Look at those beautiful logos. This session has been co-designed. Okay, and we'll just go through some quick housekeeping slides first. Amber, if you can. Thank you. So just joining through the phone. If you'd like through phone audio, this is how you do it, this beautiful graphic. Amber, if you can hit the next one. Join by phone if possible, just in case you get disconnected via internet. I did that. You can unmute your phone and please type into the chat box. We want as engaged session as we can possibly have. Next slide, please. Here is the graphic as you've seen before on how to unmute yourself via the screen. Next slide, please, Amber. And there's the chat button. Yeah, beautiful. All right, this is just a reminder for you all that we have this reflection tool that I think is going to come in handy during this session and the next one. So if you got them handy, that'd be great. And I have introduced, you can switch, yeah, please. Thank you so much. And since I've introduced myself, Romina, Youth Improvement Advisor here at Community Solutions, I'm happy to pass it off to Amber before we actually pass it along to Dr. Bernice Ramallah to get us into the meat of the session. So Amber.
I just want to say hi, everyone. I'm so very honored to be a part of this session with you all and to be learning along with you guys as well. And now to give to Dr. Bernice.
Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. We're very excited, and I'm saying we because as Romina has mentioned, this has been co-designed for authentic engagement of people with lived experience, and we're very excited to present a high-level overview. I'm the co-director and founding faculty for the People with Lived Experience Institute. And so I would love for each person to chat in their names and what are your pronouns, as well as what city organization you are with and what burning questions you have on today's topic.
And Reagan, I think this is the slide where we would want that poll.
Yes. So we have 2 questions on the poll, so please, if you can answer. The first question is, I believe engaging people with lived experience is important. And the second question is, I am in need of resources and guidance on how to authentically engage people with lived experience in my work. Welcome, everyone. I'm looking at the chat. I see we have uh, people joining from all over the country, so welcome. And also, please chat in any burning questions you have on today's topic. And for those that we can't get to today, we look forward to post-workshop engagement.
It looks like the poll is slowing down a little, so I'll give people like 15 more seconds.
Okay, so let's see what the results of the poll is. Okay, so for number one, 100% of you agree that engaging people with lived experience is important. Very pleased to read that. And 81% of you are in need of resources and guidance on how to authentically engage people with lived experience. 11% is unsure, and 8% are not in need of resources. And so through the course of this presentation and beyond, we hope to show you what it looks like to engage people with lived experience, coupled with the resources and coaching and assistance that's provided. And so this is the People with Lived Experience co-leadership team. We're co-led by Shemeka Ebony Coleman and Yolanda Rory. And we follow a co-leadership approach. And the reason why this is important to us is we started this team on the premise of enough is enough. And today will be a goal of having really a heart-to-heart conversation with all of you, because this is informed by our own lived experiences of inequities. And so with us as a People with Lived Experience co-leadership team, we were really formed as a result of the severe inequities that we've experienced in terms of authentically engaging people with lived experience. We were severely marginalized. And though it was presented that we were at the decision-making table, the reality was that we had very minimal voice in the decision-making and even in the co-design as part of an integrative voice and leadership. And so we formed as a leadership team, the People with Lived Experience Institute. And this is a form of really guiding and helping organizations to show what it looks like from theory to practice for both individuals and organizations to authentically engage people with lived experience in terms of practice. And what we've seen is that when this is integrated in terms of practice, then further inequities are not perpetuated. And currently, what we're trying to do is dismantle the inequities by having heart-to-heart conversations and really explicitly calling things out. So the work isn't pretty, as has been highlighted by Ms. Ruby Sells yesterday. Social justice work and calling out things, it's not pretty work. But our goal is to remain true and authentic in our practice. And so this is some of our guiding quotes that we've come up with in our work. And I wanted you to chat in which of these quotes stand out to you. The first is be a mirror alongside others when they cannot see the brilliance within themselves, from Shemeka. Yolanda says, for in all of us, there is a destiny tied to someone else. Let us love, share, and give that we may grow in greatness together. And then I have shared, sharing our lived experiences brings the faceless issues to the heart to promote change. So please chat in which of these stand out to you. And if it's all three, you can say all three as well. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all. Thank you all, and then please continue chatting in as part of the engagement throughout this session, because this is really truly a participatory approach. And so, as we said earlier, this has truly been co-designed. And the reason why we're following this process of co-design is we're not in the business of speaking at you. We're in the business of really sustainable change and impact. And this starts with changing from the process level to address systemic inequities. And so in the beginning, in terms of our engagement with Build for Zero, we're so pleased to have collaborated with both Amber and Romina as far as co-designing what this can look like, coupled with addressing some challenges. Next slide, please. So by the end of this session, we will hope that you will be able to define what it means to engage people with lived experience. This is because we're providing a high-level overview. We're also providing a high-level overview of our PLE conceptual framework that we use from theory to authentic practice. We also want you to differentiate between authentically engaging people with lived experience versus a checkbox approach. As I alluded to earlier, in our experience, many organizations do follow a checkbox approach, and it's our goal to help guide organizations on what this looks like to dismantle the checkbox approach and authentically engage people with lived experience. And then lastly, we want to discuss next steps for real case scenarios regarding barriers for engaging PLE. So what does it mean to engage people with lived experience? That's the question of the day. And so for the people with lived experience, we do have a PLE Institute conference coming up in December, and this provides an overview.
The People with Lived Experience Institute, www.pleinstitute.org, presents the first annual People with Lived Experience Conference, taking place on December 18th and December 19th, 2020. People with lived experience have knowledge on a system, process, or issue from the perspective of being impacted. People with lived experience are needed to improve results within organizations. People with lived experience have a personal understanding of the inequities and solutions to bridge inequities in a system. People with lived experience of inequities play an integral role in helping organizations relate to communities. The People with Lived Experience team are engaging global and local partners for best practices, and this conference will highlight how to learn from people with lived experiences of inequities as the source of solutions for policy, education, business, law, social justice, leadership, community engagement, economic empowerment, and many other topics to inform individual and organizational practices. Also, tools will be shared for authentic engagement with community. Additionally, economic empowerment will be shared through Black Girl Magic Market, and the People with Lived Experience Institute will host community listening sessions and much more. Some of the People with Lived Experience Institute partners include Crown Campaign, Change Agent Firm, Black Girl Magic Market, Shemeka, Grace Coaching Academy, Total Grace Consulting, Dr. Bernice B. Rumala, PhD Consulting, and I Am Brilliant. And we welcome sponsorship opportunities and partners for our conference. For more information, please visit www.pleinstitute.org. We look forward to you joining us at our first annual People with Lived Experience Institute Conference.
Thank you for sharing. And so this PLE Institute conference is for PLE to help organizations really navigate the systemic inequities so that there's authentic engagement. And thank you all for sharing in the chat. And so as we're looking at, oh, and I see there's a question, will this conference be over Zoom? Yes, it will be. And we're looking forward to providing further information. You can get further information for signing up at pleinstitute.org, www.pleinstitute.org. Thank you for your question. And so when we're looking at lived experience, it's expertise that does not come from training or formal education. And this is important because what's driving our work is really our shared experiences of systemic inequities as a team. And because we have knowledge on a system, process, or issue from being impacted by these very same systemic inequities, this has been a driver for our work in terms of providing solutions. And our goal is that we don't want to just survive, we want to thrive through these systemic inequities. And so that's the driver of our solutions in working with individuals and organizations to dismantle these systemic inequities. Much of our work, we prioritize those who have lived experiences of present day and historic inequities, which includes racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, ableism, xenophobia, and many other areas. And so I'm hoping that all of you will be able to join us at our institutional conference, which will be taking place in December. And so the big point I wanted to point out, and we've mentioned this earlier, is that we as people with lived experience, we have a personal understanding of the inequities and solution to bridge the inequities within the system. The thing is that when organizations are trying to engage people with lived experience, oftentimes there is a checkbox approach where there is maybe one or two PLEs who are engaged. And that's really a form of tokenism. This was touched on yesterday. And so what we're seeking is really to build sustainable relationships. So the takeaway from this session today is really a foundational high-level material, but it's going to require constant engagement with PLE through coaching and technical assistance to dismantle the inequities that have already been built up in the processes as far as the culture. And so this is why we're trying to authentically engage with organizations on what it looks like to dismantle the inequities from process leading to sustainable outcomes, because the sustainable relationships are key. Starting with sustainable relationships leads to sustainable processes, which then leads to sustainable outcomes as far as creating solutions. And so this is part of our habits of the heart that we follow. And this has been key in terms of how we engage with one another as a team, but also how we engage with others. And so I want you to chat in the box, which of these habits of the heart stand out to you? And I invite Ramina and Amber to read the habits of the heart for us.
Want me to start? All right, I'll start. Okay, so the first habit of the heart is we're all in this together.
The second habit of the heart is appreciation of otherness.
The third habit of the heart, which is also my favorite, the capacity to hold tension creatively.
The fourth habit of the heart is sense of voice and agency.
And the fifth is the capacity to create community.
Thank you. And thank you all for chatting in what stands out for you. I can tell you for our PLE co-leadership team, almost weekly, we say we are all in this together as we navigate various systemic inequities and also co-design solutions. just that understanding that we're all in this together has held special sentiment for us, as well as being able to hold tension. And one way that we've really held tension is holding tension in life-giving ways, to see how we can navigate the inequities in a way that, with the understanding that each organization is in a different stage of process. And so it's important to hold those tensions in life-giving ways so that we can help navigate having been through these experiences of systemic inequities. So thank you for sharing all. And so as part of the relationship building, if you can please chat in your name. Where does your name come from? And you can answer either one of these three. Where does your name come from? What does it mean? Or the community, where's your community and what makes your community? And or what's your amazing gift? And I can start. So my name is Bernice, and my name means bringer of victory. And if there are one or two who might want to share verbally and the others can share through chat. Oh, I see Carisha has shared, her name means beloved. It's a family name. Wonderful. Wonderful, the chats are coming in, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful, thank you for sharing. And are there one or two who would like to share verbally, either name, community, or gift?
Hi, Ken. This is Tamara. My name means flourishing palm. I'm not sure where it's from, though. And my gift is empathy, tons of empathy, all the empathy.
That's wonderful. That's a very important gift. Thank you for sharing. Is there a second person who would like to share?
Hi, I'm Kimberlyn. My name is, my mother told my aunt that I had to be named with a K, and my aunt was named Lynn, so she put it together and came up with Kimberlyn. And my community is Atlanta, and I love it because it's just a place that I feel like you can thrive, and as a person of color, and so I'm very proud of my city.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And please continue chatting in. It's all part of relationship building between ourselves and really emphasizing what's important to us as we move forward in this work. We're one big family. Next slide, please. And so as was mentioned, this has been co-designed. And so the scope of work is really to identify and learn where your organization is in the process. So as we're going through these learning sessions, presentations, I want you to ask yourself, where is my organization in the course of this partnership for co-leading and co-designing and co-implementation? And if you're not there yet, it's okay. It's really a process, it's a journey. And we're here to help you in this process. The goal also is to receive foundational concepts of the PLE framework and identify areas for improvement. And so I want you to be able to look at your organization and your work and really self-identify areas of improvement. And so two of the ways that we're going to troubleshoot ways to engage people with lived experience is through this session, but we also have another session, so stay tuned, that's coming after this later in the afternoon to understand and improve the experiences of Black and Indigenous people and other people of color. And so prior to this session, a survey was sent out, and thank you for those who were able to respond. And we received 42 responses total as far as what it looks like to engage people with lived experience. And what we've seen from the survey is that 71% of you have engaged people with lived experiences of inequities in your work. 14% said no, and another 14% were unsure. We've also asked about barriers that you experienced in your work. And all of us as a team, Ramina, Amber, and myself and the entire PLE co-leadership team, Shemeka and Yolanda, we went through your results as far as the barriers that you're experiencing. We reviewed and we discussed it, and these were all de-identified responses, both individually and collectively. And from this, we selected some scenarios for us to discuss today. For the other barriers that are presented, we do look forward to further discussing post-workshop, because all of the barriers mentioned were very important and very low-hanging fruit. But in the context of the time that we had today, we had to select a few. Also, coaching and technical assistance is available from the PLE leadership team to co-design with you as far as the breadth of areas outlined as barriers. And so this is the first barrier for discussion. I invite all of you to unmute yourselves, and I invite a participant to read this first barrier that came from an organization as far as what they're experiencing for PLE. Is there anyone who would like to read?
I can. It's difficult to engage people currently living in homelessness because they can be difficult to contact and keep engaged. Due to the complexities and crisis in their lives, people currently living in homelessness cannot also be counted on to be consistent/reliable.
Thank you for reading. And I invite all to unmute themselves and to have two or three people share verbally and others share through chat. What are your thoughts around this barrier in terms of solutions?
Hi, sorry.
Oh, hi, I'm so sorry. Please.
Sorry, I'm off camera for the moment. I'm involved in an anti-stigma campaign with Catholic Charities, and we're trying to present to like county boards of supervisors and stuff like that. And this is one of the points we try to get across, because the business community and, you know, people are like, why don't they just get a job? Or, you know, so we try to convey that the reason decision-making and problem solving doesn't happen quickly is because of these issues. So I really like this content. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I just wanted to chime in. Thanks.
Absolutely, and we invite all thoughts. So thank you for sharing. Thank you. Are there other thoughts? Because we recognize that each organization is at a different stage. So this is a space to share some thoughts.
I think there may be some challenges in being able to engage someone experiencing current homelessness, you know, on a weekly or monthly basis due to other personal crises. But I think there's opportunity for us as community members engaged in addressing the issue to just go to them and meet them where they are, and maybe have a listening session or two or three. And so it does not require the consistent regular meeting, or doesn't require them to have to get transportation somewhere or pay money to do something. We just go to them, whether that is in a place where folks with lived experience are known to convene, whether it's outdoors or at a shelter, and just engage them in an hour or two and collect the information that we can. And that allows us to not have them come to us on our terms, but to go to them on theirs.
Thank you, Carissa. Thank you for sharing. And I would love if someone can delve deeper into what Carissa has shared as far as meeting the community where they're at and what she has lifted up in terms of listening. I really appreciate you sharing that.
One of the things, my name is Thomas, I'm with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg community. One of the great things that we have done, we've established great relationships, I know on my end, with the outreach workers that are out in the field. And the majority of them, I've given them, you know, my cell phone number as well as work number so they can reach me. And I've also created relationships with council members. So they've reached out to me as well when trying to outreach. Generally, veterans is the sexy, it's kind of the quote unquote sexy topic. So everybody wants to jump on board with that. But just knowing that they can reach out to me directly at any level, that's been great for us, because if we can't get them by phone, which I believe I saw somebody mention through SSVF, they provide cell phones. but sometimes those cell phones get lost, or something could happen to the phones. So being able to reach out to one of my outreach workers through the different shelters or different programs and say, hey, have you been in touch with this person? Or them reaching out to me and say, hey, is this person currently working with your organization? It's a great way to make sure that you bridge that gap between them not having forms of communication and just being able to get in touch with them.
Thank you for sharing, Thomas. Thank you. Are there others who would like to share and weigh in, as well as share any bright spots that are occurring in your communities? With bright spots meaning any good practices or best practices to share forward in the group. Because I can tell you that this barrier is representative of, although one organization brought it forward, it's representative of many organizations and people.
I don't mind sharing that in Sacramento, we brought together a number of volunteer organizations and started just having them essentially be a network where we could coordinate together, see what each other was doing, try to help each other out. And quite often those volunteers have relationships with folks in the community that even our paid outreach workers don't have, And so they're going out there bringing water and other supplies and things like that. And so if it's a matter of trying to reach out to folks in the community who are transient by nature of experiencing homelessness, that those volunteers have more of a pulse on where they are and where they're going.
Thank you. Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing the bright spots. And I invite you to, Amber, yes, please.
I just wanted to piggyback off of that. We have, I'm from Kansas City, sorry. We've really, over the past year, really tried to integrate the volunteer organizations because like you just stated, a lot of the times our houseless friends are way more inclined to create relationships with them because they are not attached to an organization, that they automatically assume we're going to say, oh, you have to do mental health services, you have to address that substance abuse issue. But getting those volunteer organizations to come to the table with us, it took a really long time for them to trust us as well. So we've started some evening outreach groups that are going to some community meals that they provide with a few of us housing providers. And we've really been able to start connecting a lot of our long-term street homeless with services by really just sitting down at the table and eating dinner with them and really being part of their community, instead of making them come to our organization and ask for the help. I think it's very critical to meet them where they are. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you. And I invite others who have chatted in some wonderful thoughts. Please feel free to express verbally as well for the sake of those who are watching the recording. Please feel free to share verbally.
Hello, my name is Ramona Moran. I'm from the Fairfax County area. In our area, I am one of the outreach workers, but we also have our homeless drop-in on Tuesdays and Fridays where our individuals, whether SMI or not, although our PATH program serves those who are SMI, our drop-in is open to anyone who is homeless or unsheltered. And we have resources there. We have housing from the shelters come in, so clients can come there and meet, whoever they need to there. And we also do outreach and partner with our community providers and go out. So we meet clients where they are, and we also get a chance to bring them in to, a place that they need, take a shower, get a food, or whatever it is.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Are there other thoughts?
Yeah, hi, this is Debbie from the city of Spokane in Washington State. We are putting together a COC work group for racial equity, and we very much want people with lived experience to serve on that work group. And so I'm just wondering how best to make that work. And so I'm just wondering what ideas you have, because this would be a work group that would be meeting very regularly, and we want really very authentic input and excuse me, and engagement from people with lived experience?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you from our work, our goal is really to target processes from the very beginning. And we understand that there are many organizations that seek to do work groups and advisory committees, for example. What we've seen is that at times, the approach can be inequitable from the processes standpoint. And so I appreciate you asking the question as far as wanting to authentically engage from the very beginning. And this really starts with authentic co-design at the beginning, even from before the work group starts. And the co-design can look like, for example, what does it look like for voice and decision making, even pre work group establishment? Because currently the way it's being done is a work group is established as part of an organization or to fulfill a grants criteria, et cetera. And it looks good, but in terms of the authentic co-design from the beginning with people with lived experiences, it's missing. And so the first thing is to first engage the voices at the table pre-work group to see what it would look like in terms of authentic, equitable practices. What does it look like in terms of engagement for time? Oftentimes, the funding, the time that's allocated and who to engage is already pre-decided, which is not authentic co-design. As part of authentic co-design, we want to have the voices at the table at the very beginning in the decision making, address the power dynamics, and then truly co-design what the plan can look like. And understand that there will need to be flexibility in the plan to accommodate the needs of PLE, but also understand that it's also the needs of the organization where PLE will need to advise the organization. So for example, in the engagement model, it's really a co-design process of PLE helping organizations and not necessarily organizations helping PLEs to get to where they are, because these organizations often already have an inbuilt culture of inequities. So it's not our goal to groom PLE to meet the organizations, but rather the organizations need to be dismantled as far as the systemic inequities in order to really, truly, authentically engage PLE. And this is why I said today we're having real talk, because as a team, we really are not in the business of being polite, but really trying to call out the systemic inequities that have really impacted us personally as a PLE co-leadership team, and also the many communities that we serve and represent. And for us, it's a matter of life and death. And so there isn't time for niceties, but we do have time to authentically and explicitly work with organizations in transparency to help guide organizations. And so in answer to your question for the work group, it would start with true authentic co-design pre-work group, as far as getting input from PLE in the co-design of what this would look like in terms of processes, in terms of paperwork, even in terms of contracts. And that's why I appreciate the partnership with Built for Zero in terms of our engagement. Everything we authentically co-designed from the very beginning, and we communicated our processes from the very beginning. So for example, our organizational driven contracts, PLE friendly. In our practice, we actually draft our own contracts and send to organizations as an example of a best practice of what's PLE friendly.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Are there other thoughts?
I can share from behavioral health that you've hit on so many deep issues, because in the behavioral health system, people with lived experience get plugged in as peer supports, but they don't get to transform the system. and they're often mistrusted once they're plugged in because they become part of the system. So everything you've described is exactly what I would like to see happen in behavioral health too. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. And oftentimes, you know, one has to recognize the power imbalances, because when PLE then joined the system, as you've mentioned, sometimes it becomes an issue of, do I raise my voice and risk losing my job, for example? Or am I, do I just fit in for the sake of maintaining the other pressing needs that I have? And so it's a balance that we're seeing many PLEs having to navigate. And that's why it's important to explicitly call out the inequities from the very beginning. Even in our work with organizations, we're very explicit in our consultation meetings from the very beginning that our goal is not to impress. Our goal is sustainability and impact. We're not here to impress with a great message that will leave organizations feeling great and have a pat on the back, because that's not sustainable. But people are dying. And so our goal is really to move forward authentically and to have organizations dismantle systemic inequities in co-design, true co-design and true co-leadership with people with lived experiences. And this starts from processes. And so we can't focus on the outcomes if the processes are inequitable. And this even starts with data. I love the session on data yesterday, because if PLE are not involved in the data, it makes the outcomes inequitable. And this includes data collection, as well as data review. The traditional model is to include, quote unquote, the experts to review data. And right now, our goal is to really redefine what expertise is. And the expertise are really, the experts are the people with lived experience who have been through it. We have been through it as PLE. We understand the missing gaps in the data. We understand the need to understand the story behind the story through the qualitative data to understand what's going on with the quantitative data. And so for us, it's really about having the data truly reflect what's going on by engaging and co-designing with PLE. And that was touched upon beautifully in yesterday's session. And this is something we continue to uplift. And I think with that said, please continue to chat. We can move on to the next slide, please. And so the goal of our team is really to build an equitable partnership and showing what this looks like from processes leading to outcomes, because really change happens at the speed of trust. And that's why we do focus on relationship building from the very beginning and really bringing our whole selves. So for example, in our partnership with Built for Zero, it was very important for us to really bring our whole selves into the conversation, because we're not a separation of our professional and our personal hat. We're coming in as our whole selves to understand who we are as a person. And this is very important as far as the relationship building process, as well as sustainability. We also focus on support and also celebrating abundance. And the support could be even in the form of, well, how many hours of sleep are you getting? Because care for self is important as we care for our communities. Another thing is to acknowledge that we all have information and solutions on good and best practices. And that's why in the previous activity on the barriers that were mentioned from one of the organizations, we really focus on, okay, what solutions can we provide as a group that's sustainable? We also really believe in embracing collaboration completely and joyfully, because working in silos just is not helpful. And that's also what leads to many systemic inequities. So we really embrace the full collaborative approach and follow a distributive leadership platform. And that's why with us as a co-leadership team for PLE, we keep one another accountable and are quite transparent as far as how we move forward in our co-design and in our co-leadership, and even in terms of how we evaluate. Again, in terms of data, this is important. And the data that we're looking at is not just the numbers, it's really understanding the stories behind the numbers through qualitative data to inform both of our processes and outcomes. And so for us, our equity in the work leads to equity in the outcomes. And as you're chatting in, I know that we have a chat monitor. I invite the chat monitors, if you would like to share some of the feedback, please feel free to do so.
Sure. We've got a lot of good questions here. So I think we have a lot of questions just having to do with, and I think you've hit on this, but folks want to understand how to avoid tokenism and have a genuine and authentic connection. And so that came up a few times. I think there are also some kind of like practical or logistical questions about partnering with agencies to get funds if you have a restriction on funds. And that's something that was, I think you addressed earlier as well. And then someone also said, here's the last one that it might be helpful to hear a little bit about tangible examples for how doing a better job of engaging people with lived experience has benefited the system and the policy design and felt like a good process for all involved. So sort of showing some of the impact of the process when done well as opposed to done poorly. There's a question, a paraphrase of the question from Leslie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of the questions. Some of them will be answered through the course of this session, and the others will require a post-workshop engagement because we do focus on sustainability. So part of what we're providing here is a very high-level overview, because our goal is for you not to drink the water from a fire hose per se, but to take little sips at this point in terms of showing what it looks like from theory to practice. And in our work, what we've seen in the past is that when we provide information from a fire hose, it actually causes more harm to communities in terms of engagement for execution. And so that's why part of our work is to provide coaching and technical assistance alongside the resources, because we recognize that the resources alone is not enough for sustainability, but it needs to be coupled with coaching and technical assistance for sustainability from process through outcomes, so that we're not replicating and perpetuating the same inequities. And so I hope that answers and provides a broad level overview in terms of what our approach has been and what has worked in terms of our engagement with organizations. It's definitely a journey and it's a process because it took many years to build the culture of inequities. And so it takes time to dismantle the inequities. And this is based on it, both at the individual level, but also at the systemic level as well. Next slide, please. And so this is our PLE conceptual framework for engaging people with lived experience. And that's the citation as far as what we've developed. And as I said before, while some organizations have integrated people with lived experiences of inequities in the work, as far as the plan of practice for implementation, what we've seen is that the authentic engagement of people with lived experiences differs greatly in terms of theory to practice, and it depends on the organization that one is engaging with. And so the reality that it's important to explicitly call out is that there is a disconnect as far as individuals and organizations who state that they are engaging people with lived experience and what this looks like. And so in our work as a people with lived experience co-leadership team, we've been contributing to what systems-based transformation can look like. And this is an overview of the framework. And so what you see in that circle is you have the PLE co-leadership. And the reason why we emphasize co-leadership is that the PLE co-leadership really needs to be in collaboration with organizations as co-leaders. Sometimes what you have within organizations are, as I alluded to earlier, the advisory committees and other things, but one needs to ask and do a self-inventory, is it truly a co-leadership model for decision-making? And so with the PLE co-leadership within coming from communities, this then interacts with the microsystems. And the microsystems, this is at the organizational level. The microsystems at the organizational level can then inform the bigger macro systems, which is the organizational connection to communities to inform change from theory to practice. So again, moving away from that checkbox approach. Next slide, please. And so this is just going to be a very high level overview in terms of our conceptual framework and how we've also been able to show what it looks like from theory to authentic practice on a daily basis. And so on the left-hand side, you have theory to practice to drive systems transformation. And you have the PLE co-leadership model that informs micro systems to now inform the bigger macro systems as far as how organizations bridge to communities. And now on the right-hand side, these are some of the tools and ethos that we follow on a daily basis. And this is something that is that we go through as far as organizations and individuals knowing how to authentically engage from process leading to outcomes. I'll highlight a few things such as authentic listening sessions and what that looks like as far as being proactive. Also using a community of solutions and equity framework of what it looks like to lead together, lead from within, lead for outcomes, and lead for sustainability. Also meaningful relationship building and providing a space for reflective leadership is important. And again, having equity in our co-design has been important, as well as touchstones for collaboration. And the touchstones tool has been provided as part of this session already within the Built for Zero platform. Next slide, please. And so in terms of showing what this authentically looks like in terms of our process, we have under practice, some of our equitable check-ins include human being check-ins, for example. Oftentimes we're in this such a fast-paced world where we're constantly separating our professional from our personal hat. And this is not the way things are intended in terms of dismantling systemic inequities. So it's important to recognize that we're human first and to really put people first in terms of our work. And so as we're helping to care for communities, how are we caring for our colleagues, for example? Are we truly doing that authentic human being check-in? And that's authentic in terms of our practice. So even when we have meetings, our first 15 minutes of the meeting is reserved for human being check-ins to understand where the person is at in that space instead of jumping directly into the agenda, as an example. We also co-design agendas, understanding that the agenda can change at any time to meet the needs of the community or an inequity that might surface during the meeting. So again, understanding that the barometer of success and outcomes is really people first. So the success is not a checkbox on a grant or a checkbox as far as we need to meet this deliverable. The checkbox is well-being and thriving. And that's what we're using as our measures. And there's a lot more I could emphasize, but I want to be cognizant of the time that we have. Again, as you're looking at your organization, ask yourself, where do you fall? When organizations are engaging to communities, this is more of a community being informed of what you're doing. And so this would be at a much of a lower level of engagement as far as doing a needs assessment and informing community of what you're doing. And then there's the four. This is where a community is consulted, and then there are advisory roles. So this is at the middle. But then we're seeking is the gold standard, and this is what we follow as a PLE team. And the gold standard is with really co-leading, co-designing, co-evaluating, and co-implementing from the very beginning for the systems transformation that's needed so that we're dismantling systemic inequities. And so this gives another snapshot. Someone had asked what it looks like as far as practice. And so you have the consultation, which is at the lower end of engagement. And this would be surveys, focus interviews, et cetera. Then you have the middle level of engagement, which would be the advisory council, as I mentioned before. And then you have the gold standard. This is what we're seeking. So again, do a self-inventory of where your organization lies, because it truly is a journey. And the gold standard is true partnership, true shared leadership, true co-design. That's what we're seeking. And so I would like you to, and I believe many of you have seen this sheet already, I would like one or two to say which of these stand out for you. These are the touchstones for collaboration that we follow prior to our engagement in meetings. And then this is what we follow to show how we would like organizations and individuals that we're engaging with to lead and to co-lead. So please let us know which of these stand out to you, and it can be modified and adapted along the way. And I invite one or two people to share. You can unmute yourself.
I like number 2. Listen generously to each other's truths. Trust that we all hold a piece of the puzzle, and we need each other's pieces to understand the whole world, the whole picture.
Thank you. And please state why did this stand out to you in the context of your work?
It's true. It's like we all have something to say, and sometimes people listen and some people don't. And we need each other just to get through.
Thank you. Do we have a second person who would like to share what stands out for them?
I like number 4. There's a lot of defensiveness and polarization in my field, I guess in humanity in general. And it's really hard to, for people to not get into a hostile reaction when there's a difference of perspective. And so to suspend judgment would be the exact opposite of a normal reaction. The human reaction when you feel threatened, when your whole system is being, questioned, the reaction would be a feeling of threat and maybe pushing back. So to suspend judgment would be the exact opposite.
Thank you for sharing. And thanks all for sharing in the chat as well. And I invite you to please use these touchstones for collaboration as you're moving in your individual meetings as a resource. It does help to guide the conversations. Next slide, please. And so in our work as a PLE co-leadership team, we've had a number of listening sessions, and it's very important that the listening sessions are authentic and really provides a form of active listening. And this has truly guided the way that we've led our work, because what we found in the listening session is that there have been several themes. And the themes ranged from co-leadership, co-design, voice, value, power dynamics, equity, process, and ownership. And when we're looking at co-leadership and co-designing, this is important in terms of the self-inventory that you're doing for your organizations. Now, as you're taking notes, ask yourself, is there true co-design with people with lived experiences in terms of the meetings, in terms of grants, in terms of the budget, in terms of services provided? And how is this done in order to gain results? And this is something that we're actively coaching on. Also, when we're looking at voice, what we've seen is that there are some who say that they're truly engaging people with lived experience, but ask yourself, is there true voice where everyone is an equal stakeholder? And are power dynamics taken into account when people with lived experiences are invited to the table? Because there's a difference between having a stakeholder at the table and having true voice in decision making. And let me inform you of what this looks like. I've been in meetings where it's been said, let's check our privilege at the table. We're all the same. Let's just show up as ourselves, and no one has degrees at the table. And I've heard that said in many meetings, but also one has to think about what inequities does that perpetuate when one is trying to bring their whole selves to the table. And I think it's so important to recognize what privilege looks like, because I was, for example, in a conference last year where someone said in a meeting, we're all privileged in this room. And I actually raised my hand and I said, I'm actually not privileged. I've gone through quite a few inequities. I may have degrees behind my name, but I don't have the same access as some of my colleagues. I've navigated many systemic inequities, so we're not all privileged. And so it's important to understand what voice looks like when one says we're all privileged in the room, because it's not representative of all, especially persons of color who are navigating many inequities in the system. And then when we're looking at resources, we need to see, have people with lived experiences been provided access in providing input for equitable distribution of resources? And also, have there been transparency in communicating the resources available? I've also mentioned processes, and is there transparency as far as the processes to engage people with lived experiences leading to outcomes, and have the barriers been addressed in the processes? And so, for example, as far as co-designing meetings for the agenda, it's important that this is done through a process of co-design as far as what it looks like to engage people with lived experiences, where it addresses their pressing priorities versus the organization's pressing priorities. And another thing is the ownership. Oftentimes, there is a sense of organizations based on the hierarchy owning the material. And it's really important for people with lived experience to have ownership. And that's why with the People with Lived Experience Institute, we have publications that are driven by PLE, driven by those lived experiences to drive solutions. And so the traditional model and the academic model is the experts are those who've gone through certain training and theoretical frameworks, but we're not following that. Our expertise is the lived experience, grassroots experience on ground to inform the publications that are coming from the grassroots for organizations. Next slide, please. Yes. Thank you. And so next week, we have this second barrier that we've teased out of the survey. And again, there were many, many barriers expressed for engaging PLE that were very important. As a result of time, we could only select a few. And so this is a second barrier, and I invite someone to read this barrier from the team. Please unmute yourself.
I can do it. All right, so this barrier for discussion, finding people who are willing to participate. funding to compensate people for the time they are contributing if it is taking away from other activities or employment, work being done at times that may not match up with a person with lived experience's work schedule.
Thank you, Ramina. And I invite all to share their experiences as well as solutions on this, because I can tell you that this, although it's one organization that brought this forward, this is representative of many orgs. And anyone who would like to unmute themselves to share, I know that there are some conversations coming in through the chat, but please verbally share for the sake of those who are listening to the recording who may not have access to chat.
I'll share. This is Debbie from the city of Spokane again. I'm processing all of this in my mind, and I really find it challenging as you know, as I think about all the barriers that we have in our system that I've never thought of as barriers before. And you know, and one of them is how scheduled we all are and how scheduled all of our meetings are. And I was the one that brought up the racial equity work group that we're getting ready to set up and wanting to include people with lived experience and you know, and thinking about and we want to include people with lived experience at the very beginning of our process and include them in the design and everything. And then thinking about setting it up in a way different than the way we normally set up work group meetings and stuff to accommodate flexible schedules and stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, I never thought about doing that before. And of course that makes sense, but then what does that do to, you know, we're also including individuals from BIPOC agencies and communities, obviously, because we need them to be part of the solution of racial disparities in our homeless response system. And, you know, how do you mesh all those needs together and finding people to participate and make all of that work up, and also people with, you know, quote, normal 8 to 5 working schedules who don't want to meet at less than those 8 to 5 working schedules. So I guess I'm just throwing more complexities on top of the schedule, but there you go.
Thank you, Debbie. I believe that you've shared what's on a number of minds, so thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else who would like to weigh in on what Debbie has shared?
So my name's Cliff. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. I'm a homeless outreach specialist, so I'm out in the field every day with the homeless population. Specialty is working on getting them into housing, trying to find resources for them, doing all the frontline work. And I'm also formerly homeless and lived experience, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. And the biggest barrier that I have fought so far is barrier to employment because of me being an ex-felon. So some of the conversation needs to go, because so many of our homeless people have these, what I call homeless crimes. And if they're still on paper for them, or they haven't done what they were supposed to do for them, they're not even considered for housing. They're not even considered for employment. until those things are taken care of. So I think reducing the barriers of employment, reducing the barriers of, because once they get in housing and stuff, then they're prime candidates to really become part of this discussion. Because now they figured out that, oh yeah, there is a way off the streets. There is a way I can help my fellow brother get off the street or my fellow sister. So this is the barriers that we really need to look at, is the law enforcement and the injustice to the homeless population. You know, I hear every day from constituents that say, I just don't want to see them, which is probably the worst thing that I ever want to hear, because it's not that I don't want to see them. I want to help them. We are in a very rich country. We should not have homelessness in this country. And I think that we just need more buy-in, participation, philanthropy, all of that stuff to come together to make our work a little easier, because it's not easy out there right now, even for me, trying to get the folks in because of all the barriers. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you so much, Cliff. I have to say your voice is highly valued in this space, and for sharing the truth of what's going on, because inequities causes more inequities. And we do have a systems-based issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you for sharing. Are there others who would like to weigh in? And you can weigh in on experiences as well as bright spots as far as what's working in your community to share forward with the group.
I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, I was going to.
Oh, you're good. I don't feel like it's an extremely coherent train of thought, but I will attempt to articulate it. In terms of successes, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there is a project going on right now called Preventing Upstream. I mean, focused at taking a different look at how we approach preventing housing instability and homelessness. And that project is based on gathering stories of lived experience and then sharing themes from those stories using an appreciative inquiry model, and then using design thinking to create just a strengths-based framework based on what has helped people in our community who have lived experience but are no longer experiencing housing instability and homelessness. The way we've gone about doing that is if people who join the project as interviewees were tasked with identifying people with lived experience on their own, setting up interviews, based on the time that worked for that person. People who completed an interview, they got a gift card as just a thank you for taking the time to share their stories. So I think the appreciative inquiry approach with foundation in lived experience is a promising way to go for beginning interventions with that framework. In general, I'm just thinking about, why is this all so hard? Like, why is it so difficult to make people with lived experience the center of our work? Because it seems like it shouldn't be hard, but it is. There are all these barriers. And the simplest thing that comes to mind for me is just, the way all of our systems have developed, including our human and social service systems, are like on a system of otherness, where like our work schedules, the way our budgets are set up, the way we are qualified for the positions we hold that are designed in theory to help these people, is all on a system of otherness, where it's like we're on one side of just one side of the tracks, and the people we're supposed to be trying to help are on another. And that's just kind of bizarre, that there would be so many divisions. So I think operating from that place where almost no part of our systems aligns with the lifestyles of the people we're trying to help, is problematic. And it seems like there has to be a shift in human and social services to align the way we prioritize our budgets to compensate people with lived experience, for example, and the way we design our schedules and work hours to prioritize including people with lived experience as leaders in the work. Something to reduce that divide in how we operate on a daily basis. So it's not service providers constantly being positioned to do things to the population being served, or even just with them, but to truly engage them as leaders with a valued voice in the process. So not sure how that came across, but I attempted.
Thank you for sharing. No, you've raised a lot of wonderful points, and I appreciate that. And it made me think of, the value that we're assigning, even in terms of pay, and some of the lived experiences that I've had, where, and this was in a not so distant past, as I was navigating severe inequities. One of the organizations I had asked, can my services be paid for through Cash App or Venmo? And because there are many PLEs who may not have access, for example, to bank accounts and other things. And so even looking at alternative ways to compensate PLEs is critical. And this organization, and as with many organizations that had mentioned, having restrictions for the Cash App payments because of their fiscal unit restrictions. And so this presents a barrier where there are organizations who state that there is authentic engagement of PLE, but then in terms of even the very way of paying PLEs, there are barriers. And so sometimes there can be delays ranging from 2 months to even 5 months. In my case, it took 5 months to get paid. And so one has to really restructure what that looks like in terms of funding. And then in terms of what Cliff brought up earlier in terms of the employment barriers, there needs to be ways to redefine expertise and ways that don't look at, for example, criminal backgrounds that were perpetuated due to systemic inequities. These are things that have occurred because some need to eat, some need a roof over their heads, and now there's this overall blanket thing of criminalizing inequities. And so it's very important that on an individual basis, as we're going through our work, that we look for workarounds, if you will, while we're still trying to address the larger macro system. And I wanted to see if there are further thoughts to share before we move on to the next. Any burning thoughts? I see lots of things going in the chat, so feel free to verbally share for the sake of those who are listening to this.
I wanted to validate, is it Elise or Elise? Elise? I wanted to validate what you said in that, for me, the system, whether like the for-profit system or, medical system, whatever, those systems don't have people, period, as the center, any kind of people, whether it's people with lived experience, whether it's people not with lived, people in general, the actual substance of humanity as a value is not part of a system where it's like, you know, you have to have this many hours and this many contacts and this many phone calls, and, you know, systems that are based on the amount of money you make versus the quality of the relationships you build. I think that's a pervasive general issue. I'm going to make a blanket statement that I think pervasive socially in this country. And then within that, people with lived experience are also people who are not valued. But I think in general, people aren't valued. I'm not diminishing the value of people with lived experience. I'm just saying our systems are dehumanizing I guess.
Thank you so much for sharing, Denise. Very, very, very thought-provoking. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. There is a dehumanization that's happening. Next slide, please. And so this has been emphasized throughout the course of this session as far as what we seek to do as people with lived experience, and really work with organizations as far as what does co-design look like from theory to practice. And it's a process as far as addressing voice, value, and power dynamics. And also, what does it mean to measure what matters? How are we basing our metrics as far as success? And our success as a people with lived experience team is really on the foundation of relationships and sustainability. Also, what does co-leadership look like in terms of theory to practice? And that's why we operationalize what this looks like in our coaching and technical assistance, because co-leadership doesn't really mean just bringing people together in the room and saying, you're a leader, but it's really, what does this look like in terms of authentic decision-making? And then lastly, what does it look like to use a community of solutions model? Next slide, please. And so a lot of our processes have been informed from moving from understanding to action. And so we've conducted authentic listening sessions and used the process of co-leadership and co-design. And in our meetings, we always identify barriers to the existing tools. And that's why prior to this meeting, we sent out a survey on barriers. Also, we understand what's working and not working, and then create solutions for effective relationship building. And this is part of our toolkit. Next slide, please. These are some of our tools for actions. And we have a number of tools. These are just 3 of them, but we have a number of tools that have come out of the PLE leadership team that you can access on our website, pleinstitutes.org. Next slide, please. And I will hand it over to Ramina and Amber for reflections and next steps.
Sorry, you guys. So just again, honored and thank you for attending this session. Thank you, Dr. Bernice, for leading us through this work and guiding us to understand better how to have, authentic, sustainable relationships and really get back to, I think, what Denise and Elise were getting at, putting people first, and getting into the work of really dismantling the inequities, because that's why we're all here. This is why we do this work every day, to dismantle the inequities around people who are experiencing homelessness, and to really make it where it is a rare, brief occurrence, if it should occur at all. And so I think some of the things that we came out is just, I'm really energized to hear that 71% of the communities that participated in the survey are really trying to engage and are really looking at their processes, looking at those barriers, identifying barriers that they didn't even know that they had, such as the schedules that was brought up, really looking at how to unearth and see what other barriers that may be theirs, just so they can get those processes and those systems to be more equitable, and to really do what we have come here to do, to end homelessness. I would welcome Ramina to get any other reflections that she has gotten from this session as well.
I mean, for me, this session was super validating and life-giving, and I so appreciate Bernice, your time, and how you've co-designed this process with us, and giving this platform to not only discuss this, but also have this real fruitful discussion with our community members, and to actually hear the voices and also of other folks who have experienced homelessness. That to me was like, I mean, Cliff, like really, thank you so much. To be able to, in this like, this little bit of time, this little something to just create community so quickly, to be able to discuss these things that are so incredibly important. And maybe that was a long, rambling, ridiculous reflection, but I just so appreciated this and to be here in this with all of you.
Thank you both. I have to say that in our short time together, there was so much that, so much rich discussion, and this is a continuous process. It's a journey, and given that there have been a number of burning questions asked at the top of the hour, I invite you to engage with us a post-workshop as we're co-designing with Build for Zero, because it is a journey as we're going through this, and we're family now. Part of the, consider yourself part of the PLE family in terms of authentic engagement. And so thank you again all for all of your feedback.
So in addition to this session, we definitely do invite you to go to pleinstitute.org to get more information, to get access to the resources and the tools that Dr. Bernice talked about, as well as just connecting with them for further work. And we are really excited to work with them in the future around just more coaching. And we will also get to the session evaluation. Yay!
And we do, so this is a session evaluation. In 15 minutes, we're going to have our next session, which is understanding and improving the experiences of Black and Indigenous people and other people of color. So please stay tuned for that one. And as we just close out this session, as we've just been talking about before, throughout all of this, if you all want to just take some time to consider your own next steps about what you all want to do in terms of engaging people with lived experience, and just write them down on the reflection sheet, that would be so great. And that's all I've got. You've got 2 whole minutes back.
And for those who would like to sign up for our upcoming conference, the link is on our website as well under PLE conference, pleinstitute.org under the PLE conference link.
It's in the chat now.
Oh, thank you.
We'll see you all in about 15.